hope the weather is just as good in Sweden as it is in Denmark. Unfortunately, you guys can't visit us here at the moment. My name is Peter Höngaard Andersen, and I'm the chairman of Scandion Oncology. And Nils?
Yeah, my name is Nils Brünner. I'm the CEO of Scandion Oncology.
And it's a great pleasure for us this evening to present Scandion Oncology and the status of the project to you all. Maybe the plan was here to just give a brief presentation of the two of us and a little bit of our background before we dive into the company. I already told you my name, and I have a long career in the pharmaceutical industry, and 15 years in Novo Nordisk, 15 years in Lundbeck, and I started up a good handful of biotech companies while I was employed at Lundbeck and Novo Nordisk. And just to mention a few of those, KJ Pharmaceuticals, I was involved in Bioimage, I was involved in EBE Therapeutics, I was involved in Conformetrics and Comfort Therapeutics, and in Preston Therapeutics, where we had a very nice exit. And then the last 5 years, I've been managing director of Innovation Fund Denmark. And Nils, I don't know if you want to give a brief.
So my basic education is in medicine. I'm a medical doctor, trained in oncology. So I've worked for many years with cancer patients. And then I have an additional education from USA in molecular and cellular biology. And then in 2002, I became professor at University of Copenhagen in cancer biology. And during that time, I was involved in two different biotech companies. One was Vint Research, where I served as CEO for 4 years, 1 day a week. And then later on, Oncology Venture, being a co-founder. And then when we started Scandion Oncology, I left Oncology Venture at that time.
Okay, great.
I should just say that I've also been heavily involved in international cancer research. I've been chairman and member of the board at the European Organization for Research and Treatment of Cancer. And I've been teaching both in Europe and United States in cancer biology, biomarkers, drug development, and so forth.
Yeah. We got a list of questions from the organizers, which I think we'll take off from. And the first question is, what does a normal working day look like for you, Nils?
And of course, I can say there are no normal days. They're all different. And but I can give you a little hint to what's going on. So the first thing and the most important thing is to check that the clinical trials are ongoing and we are recruiting patients. Patients are being treated, being monitored, and so forth. So that's every day. The most important stuff is to check up with hospitals, with CROs, with our CMO, that the clinical study is ongoing. Then there's always a lot of emails coming in, and as many of you know, I try to answer within at least 24 hours to everybody, so nobody forgets the question that was posed. Then we have preclinical research together with Jens Stenmark, who is our Chief Scientific Officer. We also make sure that all the experiments we are performing are running and so on. There's a lot of communication. We're using BioStock, so I spent quite a lot of time by reading newsletters and taking part of interviews, both with BioStock, but also MedWatch in Denmark and newspapers and so forth. Then we have our meetings. We make sure that we have regular meetings twice a week with the whole staff to make sure also that we are keeping our timelines, checking on everybody their responsibility and if things are running the right way. Then sometimes I do roadshows, presentations. I like that actually very much, coming out, being together with the shareholders and trying to explain what we are doing and why we are doing it. And of course, everybody knows why we are doing it, because when I worked as a medical oncologist, I can't tell you how many patients and their families we've had to send home and telling them that the patient have to go home and die because the cancer cells have become resistant and we don't have more treatment to offer. So this is what's driving me, and it's a 24/7 job being CEO for Scandion Oncology. Every weekend you check what you have to do, and you also write publications and so forth. And for some of these jobs you need to be alone or more or less alone, so you can concentrate, focus on what you're doing. So that is more or less what I do during the days.
Great. Nils, I think sometimes it takes a little bit more than 24 hours to answer my emails, but maybe you're more selective when you answer.
You can wait.
Then we have a question about what's the size and competences of the team at Scandion Oncology. Could you give us an overview of that, Nils?
Yeah. So fortunately, we had time to select very good people into our team. So I'll start with Jens Stenvang, who is a co-founder. He was my associate professor for many years at the university. He has a background in cancer research from the Danish Cancer Society, and eventually we hired him as a Chief Scientific Officer. So he's taking care of all our preclinical research, but also a lot of other things. Then for all the clinical trials, we hired Peter Michael Westlev, who's actually a former colleague of mine. He's still seeing patients once a week in oncology departments in Region Zealand. And then he actually spent 7 years in the Danish Medicines Agency, where he approved or disapproved applications for new drugs to be tested. So he has a very good background in that, and he has done a lot of clinical trials. So he's a very strong on this position to run our clinical trials. Then Niklas Rost, I actually worked together with Niklas in big research when we were there. And Niklas is educated as a pharmacist, but he, as soon as he passed his exam, he started to be a specialist within regulatory affairs. And that means that he's responsible for all applications to the Danish Medicines Agency, the ethical committee, to if we do something in other countries. So he's making sure that everything is in place. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages when you submit to these agencies. So this is extremely important. And then recently we hired Annie Rasmussen, who I know from my work with Oncology Venture. Annie is primarily or originally a nurse, but for the last 20 years she has worked with biotech companies, and she is our person out on the oncology department. So she is taking care of that they do what they are supposed to do. She takes out once a week to speak to the nurses in these clinical research units in the different hospitals, and also being part of writing the protocols. And the last person is Karen Anderson, who's our CFO, and he has a lot of experience in pharma industry and biotech industry, and he takes care not only of all our economy and reporting and so on, but he's also the one helping me with all the different issues with Spotlight.
Okay, thank you, Nils. And then there's a follow-on questions. If there's specific areas where we plan to add skills and hire in, new consultants. And let me answer that, because we actually already extended the board because we wanted a board member which had extensive networks in the US. And that's actually the prime reason why we hired in Bo Rode Hansen for the board. He is currently CEO in Genevant in Boston and have a very extensive US network, plus a network to big pharma. So he is helping us out, accelerating our business development efforts further. And Nils, maybe you could add within the organization of Scandion, if you want to hire in additional people, I remember you were talking about hiring in a molecular biologist.
Yeah.
Some of the cell studies.
Yeah, so a former PhD student from the university has actually been hired to take care of our own lab research and do part of the work there. And we have in the lab we have students from the university working, and then this person will run the lab for us.
Yeah. And then we shift gears a little bit because we asked a very blunt question, which is, what is the most difficult obstacle in front of us? Is there any concrete blocks we're going to hit? Or what do you say, Nils?
I don't see it as difficulties. I see it as opportunities. So, of course, what is on everybody's mind now is how will the clinical trials run and so on. So I think the most important right now is to make sure that we get patients in a regular flow into our studies. And it looks like that they have a lot of these patients, so I'm really confident that it will happen. Otherwise, there are no obstacles really, because everything is planned. As we have reported, we have submitted a new protocol to the Danish Medicine Agency and ethical committees regarding pancreatic cancer, and there's more to come. So the studies will run and they will give us a result, and I think they will be as they will be, but I am extremely confident. And we also, I can say, we reported here recently that the first patient had finalized the initial treatment and it went very well.
Yeah, thanks, Nils. Again, the question is shifting gears a little bit, but I think I'll actually like to just step back and spend a little bit of time on Scandion Oncology in a helicopter perspective. Because, and the reason for this is that I a couple of times have got this statement slapped in my face that Scandion Oncology is just a one-trick pony. It has SCO 101 and that's it. But that's in fact not true. The company is based on extensive research work done in your work, Nils, over the past 30 years. And part of that work, you could say, is it fair to say it peaked some years ago with what in Danish is called Grundforskningsfondens grant. It's a very attractive grant given over 6 to 10 years and allow you to, you know, have sufficient funding to peacefully extend your research in depth. And that was where you did this work, which I really love, where you developed these cancer cell lines where you could actually measure if there was resistance to standard treatment. And you could also use these cell lines as screening tools to identify compounds which prevented this resistance to the treatment. And this is actually the whole foundation of the company. And this means that the lead compound obviously is SCO 101 and it's ongoing in phase 2. But there's actually 2 or more compounds in the pipeline. 201, which is ready to go into non-clinical safety relatively soon. And then there's 301, which is a bit further behind. But then on top of that, there's this platform which allows you to extend the number of compounds in our pipeline targeting different resistance mechanisms. So if anything, Scandion Oncology, in my mind, is really an oncology treatment resistance company, which is very unique. And also the fact that this platform allows you to fish out new compounds towards various resistance mechanisms. And this is very unique. Actually, Nils, I think you can be very proud of that. It's really high quality research. And this was, when I did my personal due diligence about a year ago, this was what I really liked about the company. And the reason why I said yes to your invitation to join the board. Now Nils is becoming very shy because he's not used to all these nice words, but you're probably going to survive anyway. Nils,
yeah, but could I add a little bit to this?
Yeah, sure.
So
if it's not too long.
No. I often get questions from male friends can you do something in prostate cancer, as an example? And we know from treatment of prostate cancer that we use anti-androgens or anti-testosterones, because androgens, testosterones stimulate cancer cells, so the treatment will block this stimulation. Unfortunately, all the patients become resistant. So we asked, could we do something and find something for anti-androgen resistance? So what could we do? We could simply take prostate cancer cell lines that we can buy or establish, and then make them resistant to anti-androgens. That takes 6 months or something. And then we can start finding out what are the resistant mechanisms, and we can start screening for new drugs. So if we want to extend to a fourth drug, for example, we can make the platform to include prostate cancer as the example, and then we can start finding new drugs. So this is a continuous process if we feel that we should develop more.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Nils. We're switching into the antibiotics field for a while. And one of the questions here is there a possibility that SOM-001 can be used in the animal industry as well? In principle, yes, but it looks like from a commercial point of view that the human life science area is more attractive, and we probably want to prioritize that. Then there's another question about the timeline for the additional studies we are going to conduct. And let me just, before I go into this, let me just mention a little bit about what we have done in this area, because when we confirmed the antibiotic activity of our compounds over the summer, I guess it was, we actually contacted more or less all the remaining players in the antibiotics field for two reasons. Reason number one was we wanted to give a little feel for what kind of data package they would like to see, and secondly, actually see if they were interested in licensing compounds down the road. So the data we are generating right now is more or less framed by the input we got from these pharmaceutical companies still in the antibiotics field. And how long time do you think it's going to take, Nils, before we have done all the data we're interested in? A year or so? Half a year?
A year. I mean, it depends on how much value we want to add to SOM-001. We can do it quick and dirty things, and we can do it really on the right way to do it. And I think 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's animals. You can't just do it over in a lab.
Yeah. So this is ongoing, but we got the first in vivo data out a couple of weeks ago, which looks fairly nice. But want to extend that study as well, and this is actually ongoing as we speak.
So we just got on the chat that if some of you out there want to ask questions, then use the chat function and write us a question, and we'll take it as we go.
Yeah. So the next question is, can you use the dose data from the colon cancer study in the PETA study, Nils?
Of course, we can, because we learn from these experiments. So we learn things about SCO-101. On the other hand, in the colorectal cancer study, we combine SCO-101 with two types of chemotherapy named irinotecan and 5-fluorouracil, which are standard treatment in colorectal cancer, while in pancreatic cancer, we'll combine it with a taxane named nab-paclitaxel and a chemotherapeutic drug named gemcitabine. So there are differences, but there's also a lot of similarities. So yes, we can learn a lot from our colorectal cancer study that will be included in the pancreatic cancer study.
Yeah, thanks. And the next question is about the future of the company. because it's been mentioned that a possible exit could take place as soon as we have some phase 2 data. If so, what happens with the rest of the studies that have not been started or completed? And let me say that this is, a delicate balance. As I'm sure you all know, the risk in this business is very, very high. And the chance that SCO-101 ever reach the market is less than 50%. It's standard numbers from industry. So on the one hand, it's attractive to offload the risk in a trade sale of the company. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, Scandion Oncology is a company which is more broader than just a single product. So we have a platform, a cancer treatment resistance platform. So in my mind, the most attractive solution right now would be when we had phase 2 data to actually license SCO-101 to an appropriate partner, get some upfront payment and some milestone payments and maybe some FTE payments in the company, and then use the efforts in pushing the other parts of the pipeline forward, and then let the partner develop SCO-101 further. But obviously, a trade sale of the company can never be excluded because the price can be so high that you can't say no. And let me just mention that I had an exit with the company Prexton 2 years ago, where we exited the company for a total deal value of $1 billion and $120 million as upfront payment. So it was a very attractive deal. So we couldn't say no.
I think this is for you. Is it normal that you put some more efforts into meeting business BP before you even know whether it works in phase 2?
Yes, in my mind, it's absolutely normal that you meet your future customers as early as possible, because deal making is an art form, and this art form requires actually, point number one, that you show people that you actually meet your milestones and deliver. Secondly, that you build a personal relationship with your future customer. And that takes time. So it's important that you meet your future customers as early as possible, learn them to know, and so they can see that you actually progress the project. So that's completely normal in my mind. And I can tell you that in my past life, when we had done deals, both at Lundbeck and Novo Nordisk, we already and always followed these companies for several years before we made a deal.
Then there's another question, and that relates to the ongoing colorectal cancer study. And the question here is it really enough with 2 patients who respond to have proof of concept? And the answer is yes, because we are following an international study plan named Simon's 2-stage design. And please remember that when we get these patients into our study, they have failed prior treatment, but we continue the treatment that is not working any longer, and then we make it to work. So if we, among the first 25 patients, have 2 or more patients who actually respond to the treatment, we have proof of concept, and this is international guidelines. But hopefully we'll have more.
Then we have a question on the commercial value of SCO-101, which we previously reported to annual sales of about 2.5 billion euros. Is it the same today, or is it larger? I think it's important to understand, whereas cancers mostly is diagnosed based on anatomy, then SCO-101 is actually completely different, because it's actually based on mechanisms. And the same mechanism, for instance, taxanes, are used in a lot of different cancers. So this means that the normal restriction in market size you see with new cancer drugs do not apply to SCO-101. So at least what I envision, as not being an oncologist, Nils, and then you can correct me, is that basically, whenever you have a taxane-treated patient which become resistant, then you can basically add SCO-101. And this accounts for several different mechanisms. So I must admit that 2.5 million is quite a big, 5 billion euro is a big market. And I'm a little concerned on calculating how big this could be, because it's actually astronomical. But that's also why it's so interesting to work in this area. I don't know if you want to add anything, Nils.
No,
are you good?
I totally agree. No.
Yeah.
We have a question here. Any specific reason for changing the pipeline from breast cancer to pancreas as number 2? And I can say yes, there was a very specific reason that we learned from any clinicians we talked to, that breast cancer and chemotherapy and clinical trials is very tough. And the reason being that there is about 12 different treatments that are standard treatments following each other that the patients have to pass before we actually can start testing SCO-101. And secondly, there are many large companies that have drugs they want to have tested in breast cancer, so it can be difficult to get into breast cancer and chemotherapy. The reason for selecting breast cancer was that this is one of the at least 10 different cancer types that are treated with taxanes. And we wanted to, to test our SCO-101 against taxane resistance. But also in pancreas, it is the drug of choice for first treatment of pancreatic cancer. And there's a lot of patients, they don't have a second line treatment really, so they only have this treatment chance. And there are, at least here in Scandinavia, very, very few treatment protocols in pancreatic cancer. So it was obvious for us that changing from breast cancer to pancreatic cancer would secure that we'll get the right patients and a lot of these patients into our trial. If we had stayed with breast cancer, the risk was that we could not recruit patients.
Thank you, Nils. The next question relates to our, you could say, journey to the JP Morgan conference in January. And I would like to say here up front that I attended JP Morgan actually for almost 30 years. Back then it was called H&Q. And we reported back then that we met several of the big pharma companies, and that they were very interested in looking into the immune oncology space, where it's been reported that combining immune oncology with chemo would actually synergize the effect. And Nils, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit on how this is going.
Yeah, as we showed in our Q1 report, that in order to get this synergistic effect or additive effect between immune oncology drugs and chemotherapy, the cancer cells have to be sensitive to the chemotherapy. So they release these antigens that are taken up by this specific cell type named the dendritic cell, and then presented to the effector cells, the T cells that can go in and kill the cancer cells. But if the cancer is resistant, it doesn't work. And that's where SCO-101 comes into the picture. By adding SCO-101 to patients with resistant tumors, they can be changed to sensitive tumors, and we get the whole cascade running.
Yeah, and I could maybe add here that the way we work is that when we sign agreements, as we did with Alligator last week, we obviously ensure that the companies we talk to and which were interested in this area, and I'm now meaning big pharma, we actually, make them aware that this is ongoing and we will have the result in X months, and we'll obviously keep them posted just to keep their interest going. So that's the way we work. Then we have on the chat a question, which is, why do you think there's such a big value difference between you and Oric? And we obviously asked ourselves that question. And some of it is obviously the difference between Europe and the US. And then I must admit that I'm a little concerned on being in Oric, if I was in Oric, that you are valued so high and so early, and with such a meager pipeline. But I guess that's the way things are done in the US. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, I got extremely pleased, first of all, seeing there was another company. It's hard to be alone, and many people have asked me, so if it is so important what you're doing, how come there's nobody else? But suddenly there is a second one now, and the other one is the recognition of that this could be a huge market.
Yeah. We got a question. Could you tell us more about Guggenheim? And let me just mention up front, I worked very closely with Guggenheim in the Preston case. They were actually our banker facilitating that deal. So obviously I have very good contacts with Guggenheim. And I can tell you that we have been discussing with those guys exactly about the value difference between us and Oric. And it's an ongoing discussion which we will, kind of harvest their input and come back and see what we can do about it in due time.
I think this is also for you, Peter.
Yeah, so we got another question. You mentioned that you want to go for out license as the most lucrative for us with upfront and milestones. Will we get a dividend then? Well, you could either get a short-term win, or you can invest in the company. And I think GenMap is a very good example of a company where the licensing deals were reinvested in the company. And I guess you all know how the share price looks like in GenMap today as compared for 15 years ago. So I would, prefer to reinvest in the company. Then we have a question. Is it?
Should I? No, okay.
Yeah,
should I take this one?
I'll read it and then
Okay,
you'll answer,
yeah.
Nils. Is it possible that you will find that the SCO compound will do its job on the FX pumps, but that the tumor is still growing, so that the SCO 101 will actually work, but not with the selected chemo? Or is it always correlated?
So, as you know, we have one ongoing study with irinotecan and 5-fluorouracil in colorectal cancer, and we'll start the second study with taxanes and gemcitabine in pancreatic cancer. So these drugs are selected among many types of anti-cancer drugs because these are the ones where SCO works in all our model systems. So I expect that, for example, with the irinotecan, which is a substrate for these pumps, that means that the pumps will bind irinotecan and pump it out, prevent it from entering the cells, prevent it from killing the cells. So I think there's a very nice correlation. This is what you are asking about. If we use the right drug together with SCO-101, we'll see the correlation, because then irinotecan will just enter the cells when we have blocked the pump and killed the cells.
Then we got another question, which is, do you see interest from foreign banks and funds? It might be hard when listed at Spotlight. Yes, we know that Spotlight maybe is not the ideal platform to be listed at. And this is something which we are discussing with several banks at the moment, what we could do about that. But I can tell you that nevertheless, we have actually presented to several banks and funds which invest in listed companies because they're simply interested in the platform and in our technology. And I'm sure you may learn more about that in the near future. Then we got some sensitive questions. Will we get an update on how the negotiations are going with Big Pharma? Probably not. You will get a general information that it may be ongoing, but we won't say anything until the deal is signed. And then the second question is, Peter, you have said in several interviews that you intend to buy more shares. Are you still having these thoughts, and will this happen over the market? I can tell you that I last month bought a bunch of shares, and this is not the last time I have been buying shares, and will do it again. Then we have a question, what about market analysis? How do you evaluate Scandion within the big pharma negotiations? And can we expect to see a full market analysis and valuation for Scandion and all its candidates? And the answer is yes. We are right now talking to several banks about making an analysis and judgment about Scandion and our value. So you will see that coming out in the not too distant future. Then we have a question about Oric Pharma again, and it's related to the same thing. They are valued $1 billion US, and Guggenheim again, and the 1 billion US corresponds to 10 billion Swedish kroner, and being in phase 1. And the question is, why shouldn't we be valued at the same level? I think we already answered at least part of that. Part of the explanation here is the difference between US and Europe. And again, I'll point to GeneMap just as an example on a company which was valued very, very low 15 years ago. But as they delivered and their products started to bring in license fees, I think the stock is now very, very interesting, with the value very close to 2,000, which is 2,500 Swedish kronor per share, which is very interesting. And you could actually buy it for less than 10% 15 years ago. So I agree. I think we value too high. My personal opinion, or too low, sorry. My personal opinion is that Oric is valued too high. And I think that's going to even out over time. Anything you want to add here, Nils?
No.
We know that it's enough with 2 to 3 patients showing response to achieve proof of concept. A quick exit by sale or licensing agreement is our obvious short-term goal, as communicated before. And in January, you stated what will happen with Scandion when we have phase 2 data. We get bought up and disappear. With phase 2 results just around the corner, do you still believe that? And was the statement regarding the Oric market cap reflect a fair value benchmark for Scandion?
Yeah, so I think we're a little bit more differentiated when we talk about what will happen in the future. Nobody knows, but as Peter said, there's a possibility that we will sell a license to SCO-101 and then continue development on our platform. There's also the possibility that somebody is coming in and just buying the whole company, and then yes, we will disappear, and all shareholders will get money from such a sale. So we don't know exactly how it will be. We'll see, but with good phase 2 data, I think everything can happen.
Yeah. And maybe just to add a little bit about competition here, it's very clear from one of the big pharmas we talked to that they potentially expressed the interest in acquiring the whole company rather than just the product, because that way they would be able to keep the competitors from getting access to future resistant stock, or at least delay it. So that could be an argument for an early trade sale rather than, a continued existence of Scandion, but with a license agreement on the lead compounds. But we'll see. You never know what happened, and you can be offered a price where you simply cannot say no. We'll see. And any further questions, please put them on the chat. But otherwise, I would actually like to repeat what I said at the General Assembly, namely that I think Scandion Oncology is a very interesting company approaching a complete new avenue in oncology treatment namely overcoming the resistance to some of the basic treatments which are offered in oncology. And I think the commercial value of this is actually pretty impressive if you start to calculate the way you normally would do this. But we'll see how it works out. As I already mentioned, there's a very big risk for failure at this stage we are in, but we are confident, and we have the advantage here that we have biomarkers which can tell us whether the drug is coming into the patient. We have biomarkers which can tell it whether it's expected to work on the mechanisms we have identified. So I think we have a hook which actually increase our chances of success. Then there's a question about Sanonia's 18% ownership in Scandion. Will they keep them? As far as we know, Sanionia is right now considering to sell their ownership share in Scandion. A final decision on this has, to my knowledge, not been made. And we expect to go into discussions in the near future about this. Anything you want to add, Nils?
So I just want also to say thank you to all of you who have spent this wonderful evening with us, and I do hope that we have been able to answer most of the questions. Otherwise, just send us emails and we'll do our best.
We actually just got a question in, which is, was it correct that you said earlier that there's a 50-50% chance to succeed? No, what I said was that there's a greater than 50% risk of failing at the stage we are in, and this is standard numbers from the industry, which should be no surprise by anybody. But what I said in addition to that was that we do have 3 biomarkers which give us a very nice hook and will increase our chance of success. We have what we call the exposure biomarker, which means that we can actually measure whether the drug is coming in and doing its job. And then we have 2 biomarkers, which is the target of the company. It's a kinase and the pump, and we can actually measure whether these 2 targets are present in the patients. So we'll know if the patient is a no responder, if the target has been there or not. And I think that's going to be very helpful as we move along, Nils. And I'll again like to compliment you for actually working on these biomarkers as early as you guys did. And we have a question about when is the first cohort gonna be finished? Can you answer that, Nils?
Yeah. So as we reported, the first patient had passed the treatment, and I also told you that the patients are in queue in the oncology departments to enter the study because they have no other options. So as soon as we're done, there will be a report on the first 3 patients. That's the only thing I can say now.
Yep. I think that was more or less what we had on our agenda tonight.
And thank you to Sebastian and Oscar and his team, and to Aktietipset, to Aktietipset for making this possible. I think it was a wonderful idea, and I think we should repeat it at some point in the fall.
Yeah, and also thanks from my side. And in case you should have additional burning questions coming up, don't hesitate to skip a mail to us, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.